Hi chess fans, welcome to this video on the main ideas in the Open Ruy Lopez or the Open Spanish. The Open Spanish appears after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, the Ruy Lopez or Spanish variation, and after a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castle. Black can choose to take the pawn with the knight, winning a pawn temporarily. The other main idea is to play a bit more careful, maybe bishop e7. Bishop e7 is a much more commonly used move today. But after knight takes e4, white gets something back for the pawn, which is that white can play immediately d4, attacking this pawn, and if black takes this pawn, white can immediately gain an advantage with pinning the knight, which so happily has taken the pawn earlier, against the king, and black will lose a piece now. After d5, trying to protect this knight, white has knight takes d4, which repairs f3, attacking this knight, which is pinned against the king, and also attacking the knight, which is pinned against the king. So black has to play something like bishop d7, and after takes, white will win the knight. So after the knight takes and white takes d4, black cannot take with the pawn. And by the way, black can of course also not take with the knight, because this would simply lose a piece as well. Or rather, it would be even stronger to play rook e1 here, pinning the knight, and then you will be able to win back both the knight and the pawn. Okay, so after knight takes, the main move is d4, and now something interesting to note. The position of the bishop is here on a4 because black has played a6 in move 3, and this motive of taking here and then white playing d4 is something we also know from another very commonly played variation, which is the Berlin variation. In the Berlin variation, black immediately plays knight f6, and after castles takes. And now white also plays d4, but black has the resource knight d6, attacking the bishop. The bishop is not protected and is attacked, so the bishop has to move. And the Berlin variation continues from here. On the other hand, if black plays a6 here, and then after castles takes, we are in the Open Spanish, which means that after d4, black would not gain anything from playing knight d6. Okay, so in this position, white is threatening to win back the pawn, and we have seen that black cannot take with the pawn because of the open file, and we have seen that of course this pawn can also not be taken by the knight. So black here almost always plays b5, pushing the bishop back, so this knight is maybe free to take this pawn at some point. And in this position here, black basically has to play d5, protecting the knight. And this is the only move being played. Let's have a look at a few alternatives. If, again, the pawn would take here, white ends up a lot of initiative and material, or even mating, because this open file is just so strong. White can play knight c3 here, very strong move, because after takes, white has the double attack of the bishop on the two knights, so white has given up this piece here, but will win it back immediately here with check, and here also with check with the rook. So if black tries bishop b7, everything will just break apart very quickly. So d5 is the only move. black cannot take with the pawn. Black can also not take with the knight, because white simply wins a piece. And another idea might be maybe now to play bishop e7, but so black cannot have it all. Black has won this pawn here and now wants to play bishop e7 to get the king out of danger. But white can simply take and win back his pawn. And after castles, again, white has this motive of just attacking these loose pieces after this pawn is gone, and if black doesn't play d5, this knight here becomes very weak for attacks. The knight moves away. White just has this so much more active position, a lot of space, all the pieces are active, and all of black's pieces are kind of blocked and not really participating yet, so white is much better here. Okay, so that's why black in the open Spanish almost always plays d5. This also nicely protects the knight, so it's logical in a way that black says, okay, I took here with the knight, but now I'm protecting it. As a consequence, however, white will now win back his pawn. And the material is now equal, and white has immediately an attack on this pawn. And this highlights very much what the discussion in the open Spanish is about. And this is really the main idea and the main situation in this position. White has this pawn which is kind of advanced and might be protected or not might be protected by his pieces. It is hindering black's development a little bit, but it might also be weak. On the other hand, black has this pawn, and this pawn is protecting the knight, but it is immediately attacked, for example, by the bishop and the queen. It can also be attacked by other pieces. It cannot maybe so easily advance because white can maybe block it. Maybe white has also plans to block it like this. So the discussion in this open Spanish is really those two pawns. Are they weak or are they strong? And we will see in all the variations that are the main lines in the open Spanish, it always comes down to, are these two pawns weak or are they strong? Okay, so as said, white is now very concretely attacking this pawn, and black almost always plays bishop e6, protecting the pawn so that black doesn't lose the pawn. Theoretically, black could also protect the pawn with the knight, and then maybe later with the pawn, so it's an interesting idea, but the problem with this is that the bishop is caged in, and already black is a little bit back in development, so this is probably a big mistake because white can now attack. So almost always black plays bishop e6 here. And now let's take a little step back. In this position here, main line Spanish, knight f6, white castles, and normally black plays bishop e7, a closed Ruy Lopez, closed Spanish. Black takes now, with the open Spanish, takes a lot of initiatives, and black basically says, we are now playing an open Spanish. So if white is not used to these lines, black is basically saying, look, I'm defining how the game is going to be like now. But actually, as we have seen, white now plays d4, black has to play b5, white plays bishop b3, and black basically has to play d5, protecting the knight. White takes back his pawn and attacks the pawn on d5, and black has to play bishop b6. So in a lot of ways, black is defining the game by choosing to play the open Ruy Lopez in the beginning, but then black basically makes a lot of forcing moves, and it is now actually white who will define the game in this position. So interesting thing to think about. It's always a question who chooses the opening, because you might choose an opening that you are better prepared for. The open Ruy Lopez is actually an opening where white gets to choose what variation is played. Because in this position here, again, we have said the plans all evolve around the ideas, are these pawns weak or strong? But now white has a choice of playing moves that are all good plans and good moves. So let's have a look at what white can play here. White has the idea of playing knight to d2, knight b d2. White has the idea of playing queen e2. White can also have the idea of playing c3 and bishop to e3. So let's have a look at these ideas and these plans one after the other. So maybe one of the best moves is knight b to d2, immediately asking the question to the knight. It's a very straightforward plan. What are you doing there? And the idea is that after knight takes, white takes with the queen, and now if black wants to develop, black has to somehow play a bishop move, either to e7 or to c5. Most commonly black plays e7 here, wanting to castle, and then rook d1 puts pressure on this pawn. And it's already unclear how black is going to keep this pawn. Black will in fact probably have to castle and lose the pawn. So this is the idea behind knight b to d2, immediately asking the question to the knight. And black basically doesn't want to enter this line, but black usually retreats the knight to c5. And you could say this is already a little concession because white has simply played one move, asked this big glorious knight here, what are you going to do? And the knight is already retreating. So in this position, white attacks the bishop, and after c3, might be happy to take the bishop. Basically, this bishop is at the moment pretty caged in. It doesn't have many squares. And the main move here is c3, where basically white says, look, either you take this bishop now, but then I retake with the knight, and I have good control of the d4 square, so show me that this pawn is strong because it cannot move forward so easily now. And by the way, I can now gang up and attack it. So you still need to develop, and basically you have the bishop pair, but this pawn might get weak and I'm a little ahead in development. Or with c3, white is saying, okay, so if you want to continue developing, and this is what black usually plays, I'm going to move my bishop to c2, and you know what, my pawn here is actually blocking the square for any knight, so if you're going to castle, I might develop a good attack here on your king. So after knight bd2, the knight usually retreats, and then white asks a question with c3 and is happy with either alternative. If black takes, or if black doesn't take, and white gets the strong bishop battery on the king, which coordinates nicely with this pawn. Okay, so if black plays the open Spanish, and as we have said, we need to look at these, we will end up in this position. Black has to be prepared if white plays knight b to d2. Another common plan is queen e2. Queen e2 basically puts the queen on the direct line with the king and also aims to play the rook over to d1 quickly, which would pin this pawn here against the queen and aims to open up the position like this really quick and put pressure on the d5 pawn. Together with knight bd2, this is a very strong plan, and maybe this plan is even a little bit more flexible because it's not so forcing as knight b to d2. So if I had to pick a favorite plan or move, this would probably be mine. Okay, black usually continues to develop. Now white puts the rook on d1, and black wants to finish his development. And now we can see that black has already this pressure on the d5 pawn, and now white has this pressure, and now white can even increase this pressure by playing c4, and the idea, or the point is that the queen is pinned, and also this pawn, if it ever takes here, this knight is also hanging. So c4, very strong move, and if black takes with the b pawn, the same motives are still in the position. White can simply take, and basically what white has done. White has exchanged these pawns, highlighting the weakness of this pawn, and now has very active plans for all of his pieces. Black could now play bishop c5, putting some pressure on the f2 square, which has been vacated by the rook. But white can play bishop e3, which asks immediately a question to this bishop, but also controls the square in front of the pawn. Again, the question is always around these pawns in the end. Black would probably exchange here, and now black puts the queen out of the harm's way of the pin and attacking the b2 pawn. And the main round continues bishop b3. Now this bishop could be taken, and also the b2 pawn gets protected like this. Makes sense for black if he plays queen b8 to follow up with knight a5. And now white can continue playing with knight b2, asking a question to the knight, protecting this bishop if it gets exchanged, and also if the knight ever ends up here. These pieces coordinate nicely against the d5 pawn, and the position is equal, and the game continues. But again, if you look at this line, queen to e2, if black chooses not to play bishop e7 and castle, which if you want are quite, well, they're developing moves, but it's also moves that get the king out of harm's way as soon as possible. If black plays anything else here, white gets a lot of pressure really fast. So I don't want to say black has to play bishop e7 and castle, but black really has to know this variation and know that white is really quick to build up some pressure here with all the motives that we have seen. And if black goes wrong and doesn't play bishop e7 and castle, white gets some serious initiative really quick. Whereas white has relatively simple plans, swinging the rook over on the file, etc. And after castles, white has to know the strong move c4, and here black has to already play very precise. Otherwise, these motives, I mean, look at this, the knight is hanging, this pawn is attacked, the pawn cannot advance, like all the natural moves are difficult. Black has to take here and exchange these pieces, then use the tactical resource of attacking f2, and then get the king out of the pin, and all these are moves that black has to find. So combined with the fact that after the open Spanish in this position here, it's white to choose what plan white goes. If white goes knight b2 or queen e2 or the other plans that we will see, black really has to play relatively precise, only in the end to get an equal position. Okay, so let's quickly have a look at two more plans that white can have in this position and that black also needs to prepare for. One is the plan c3. It's a little bit of a slower plan, again playing against the d5 pawn, because the c3 pawn is taking away the d4 square from this pawn, so the pawn cannot advance so easily, and is also opening up some space for the bishop, so it's absolutely logical. But basically black can here play a little bit more aggressively, bishop c5, pinning the rook to the defense of the f2 square, and this bishop and this knight is coordinating well here. So if the knight is already here in the front, black would love to play bishop c5. So this makes this plan with c3 maybe a little bit slow, but it's still playable. White can follow up with knight bd2, and all these motives and weaknesses in the position are still there. So black better castles. And now white can play bishop c2, asking the question to the knight, and even though this rook could not move, white is in this position saying, okay, is your bishop really so good here? I am controlling anything that this pawn could do. This pawn here is at the moment safe, and I kept my bishop here, which is eyeing your king. So I'm going to play on from this position, and probably this position is equal. But again, maybe not as precise as queen to e2 or knight bd2. The last plan is a little bit an upgrade to the c3 plan. We have seen after c3, black gets this nice bishop c5, so white can also play first bishop e3, which is also absolutely logical because it takes any bishop c5 move out of the position. And also the bishop is useful here, controlling the square in front of the d5 pawn. And it's a developing move. So black now still has to develop and castle, so black will play bishop e7 here because the c5 square is not available. And now white can play c3, again saying, I want to control this pawn, this square is now not available, I want to play my bishop to c2 and play from there. And because my pawn here is taking away any knight square here, I will have a good attack on your king. The game continues castle. I mean, black has to castle in the end, so white can very slowly set up his pieces for an attack. Knight bd2. I mean, all the motives are the same. Often it's just like move order questions, of course. But still, in this position here, the bishop is on e3, which is arguably a more active square for the bishop, and it takes out bishop c5 of the position. ad8 and bishop c2 again. White is setting up his pieces against the black king. And also now the knight really is asked the question, where do you go? And in this position, there's not so much to do for this knight. It would not have so much purpose on c5, so the best is here to exchange. And what white got with bishop e3 is, black got time to consolidate and also has the bishop pair, and it's not clear that white has a forcing attack here, but white got his pieces lined up for an attack on the king, and this pawn here is safe and protected and coordinates well with the attack. And at the same time, this pawn here is under control. So also a little bit more slow, but certainly a very solid plan. Maybe a little bit of an upgrade against the c3 plan because it prevents any pressure by bishop c5. Okay, let's have a quick recap. I mean, we looked at a lot of variations, of course, as well. But again, in the open Spanish, these moves are forcing, as we have seen, up until bishop e6. And now, if you don't remember any of the variations, don't forget the main plan here is to make sure that this pawn doesn't advance and that you keep on attacking this pawn, and that you are making sure this pawn is protected, because the discussion is about which of these pawns are weak and strong. And if you are black, make sure you finish your development quickly because the position is already relatively open. And as white, of course, try to take advantage of the fact that black is not so developed yet. Play against this pawn. And again, knight bd2 is a plan. Queen e2 with rook d1 is a very fast plan. c3 is a very solid plan. And bishop e3 taking the square away is the other main plan for white. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you got a better understanding of the Open Ruy Lopez. If you liked this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel so that you get an update from YouTube when new videos are available. Thanks a lot for watching.